Charleston, South Carolina, May 2025. The air in the Charleston County Courthouse was thick with the kind of tension that clung to your skin like humidity. Old wooden benches creaked under the weight of restless spectators, their whispers barely audible over the hum of an overworked air conditioner. The scent of stale coffee and musty paper lingered, as if the room hadn't been aired out in decades. It was a place where justice was supposed to be served, but to Maya Thompson, a 42-year-old black congresswoman and former civil rights attorney, it felt more like a stage where truth was often rewritten before the curtain fell. Maya sat in the third row, her navy blazer slightly wrinkled from a long morning, her black slacks pressed but unpretentious. No security detail flanked her, no nameplate announced her presence, no microphone waited for her voice. She was just a woman with a thin file in her lap, her dark eyes scanning the room with an unhurried calm that belied the fire within. Her worn-out flats tapped softly against the floor, a rhythm born of habit rather than nerves. She wasn't here on official business, not as a congresswoman anyway. She'd come because of a tip from an old colleague. A 17-year-old black teenager, Micah Carter, was facing a preliminary hearing for suspicious behavior outside a convenience store. No cameras, no public notice, no lawyer by his side. The kind of case that slipped through the cracks unless someone dared to look. Maya knew those cracks better than most. 22 years ago, her older brother, Marcus, had been beaten to death by police during a routine stop. The official report called it resistance during an administrative check. No apology, no accountability, just a closed file and a family left to bury their grief. That loss had forged Maya, not into a firebrand shouting for justice, but into a quiet force, one who understood that silence could be a weapon or a shield. Today, she wasn't here to speak. She was here to see. The courtroom was half full, a mix of bored clerks, anxious families, and a few reporters chasing small-town stories. Through a small window in the adjacent holding room, Maya caught a glimpse of Micah. He wore an oversized hoodie, his hands loosely cuffed, his legs swinging gently as if he were still a child on a playground. His eyes darted around, not with defiance but with the confusion of someone who didn't yet understand why he was here. No one sat beside him, no parent, no advocate, just a kid swallowed by a system that seemed to have already decided his fate. Across the room, near the prosecutor's table, stood Officer Calvin Reese, a 47-year-old veteran of the Charleston Police Department. Tall and broad-shouldered, Reese carried himself with the arrogance of a man who knew the room belonged to him. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights, but it was his eyes that caught Maya's attention, cold, calculating, and fixed on her for a moment too long. She didn't recognize him, not yet, but she knew that look. It was the same one she'd seen in courtrooms across the South, the kind that said, "You don't belong here. Don't make me prove it." Their eyes met for a split second, and Maya felt a chill, not of fear but of recognition. This wasn't just tension, it was a warning. She straightened her back, took a slow breath and held his gaze, her calmness a silent challenge. Reese's hand twitched, adjusting his belt, his epaulets, anything to mask the unease her presence stirred. He didn't know who she was, not exactly, but he sensed she was trouble, a threat to the carefully constructed order he'd spent years enforcing. The room's energy shifted, subtle but undeniable. A woman in the back row stopped whispering to her neighbor, her eyes flicking toward Maya. A clerk's pen paused mid-sentence, the tap-tap-tap of her keyboard falling silent. Even the judge, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses, seemed to sense the change as he shuffled papers at the bench. No one called Maya's name, no one waved her forward to speak, but her presence alone was enough to make the air heavier, the silence sharper. It was the kind of quiet that made people afraid to breathe, afraid to break whatever spell had settled over the room. And then that silence shattered. The courtroom door creaked open and Micah was led in, his cuffs clinking softly. His cheek bore a fading bruise, purple and yellow, a mark that hadn't been there when he was arrested. His dark eyes scanned the room, landing on Maya for a fleeting moment before dropping to the floor. She saw his hand twitch, a reflex to the harsh lighting or the weight of unfamiliar faces. The stenographer tapped her desk, but no one paid her any mind. All eyes were on Micah except for Reese's. His gaze was locked on Maya, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles bulged, white against the tan of his skin. Reese couldn't hide it, not the agitation, not the anger. It wasn't because Maya had done anything wrong, but because she dared to be here in his courtroom, watching a case he'd worked hard to keep buried. He didn't want questions, didn't want anyone peeking into the system he'd helped build, case by case, file by file. To him, Maya wasn't just a congresswoman or a lawyer. She was a crack in the foundation, a threat to the machine he'd oiled with silence and power. The judge cleared his throat, his voice gravelly. This is the preliminary hearing for the matter involving the defendant, Micah Carter, on the 12th. He didn't finish. Reese stepped forward, his boots heavy on the worn linoleum floor. He said nothing, asked no permission, issued no command. He just walked, his eyes locked on Maya like a predator sizing up prey. The room froze, every breath held, every pin stilled. Maya didn't move, didn't flinch, her eyes steady as he closed the distance. And then it happened. Slap. Reese's hand struck her cheek with a force that echoed like a whip crack in an old jailhouse. The sound ripped through the courtroom, sharp and final. A violation so brazen it seemed to stop time itself. Maya's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning, but she didn't fall. She didn't raise a hand to her face, didn't cry out, didn't even blink. Her eyes stayed open, fixed on Reese, as if the slap hadn't touched the one thing she protected most, her dignity. For a moment, the world stood still. The judge froze, his glasses slipping down his nose. The prosecutor gripped his file so tightly his knuckles paled. The clerk's pen clattered to the floor, rolling under her desk. A mother in the front row gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while a teenager beside her stared, wide-eyed, as if witnessing something he'd never unsee. No one stepped in. No one shouted. No one dared move. Except Maya. She didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't demand justice. She simply stood, her posture unwavering, her gaze unyielding. That silence was her first counterstrike, more powerful than any outburst. It wasn't the reaction Reese expected, not the tears or the rage he was used to provoking. His hand was still red from the blow, but it was he who trembled, his confidence unraveling under the weight of her stare. In her eyes there was no fear, only recognition, not of a man, but of a system, a rot wrapped in a badge and a uniform. Not yet, she said, her voice soft but piercing, like a verdict delivered in a whisper. 2 words, barely audible, yet they echoed in the room like a gavel strike. Not yet. The time would come when Reese and the system he served would answer not just for this slap, but for every injustice buried under procedure and power. For now she stood, her cheek stinging, her heart steady, forcing the room to confront a question no one wanted to face. If an officer can do this in open court, what has he done when no one was watching? Reese stepped back, his boots scraping the floor, his bravado crumbling. He glanced at the judge, not for forgiveness but for support, but found only a vacant stare, the old man's hands trembling on the bench. The prosecutor looked away, his lips pressed into a thin line. The clerk's fingers hovered over her keyboard, unsure whether to record what had just happened. There were no juror, this case wasn't deemed important enough, but every person in the room knew a new trial had begun, and Maya was its judge. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the faint buzz of a phone vibrating in someone's pocket. Maya adjusted the collar of her blazer, a small gesture, almost meaningless, but it made Reese flinch as if she'd drawn a blade. She hadn't changed, hadn't faltered, but she was shaking the room simply by standing still. Her presence was a mirror, reflecting the truth no one wanted to see. This slap wasn't just for her. It was for every person who'd ever stayed silent to survive. Every name erased from a file. Every voice told it didn't belong. In the back row, a young man in a faded hoodie slipped his phone from his pocket, his hands shaking as he angled it toward the scene. He'd been recording since Reese approached, capturing every second: the slap, Maya's unyielding stare, the room's stunned silence. He didn't know Maya's name, didn't know she was a congresswoman, but he knew what he'd seen, a black woman standing tall against a system that expected her to break. His thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating, then pressed upload. The video, grainy but unmistakable, hit social media with a caption, "This just happened in Charleston. Is this justice?" Within minutes, the post began to spread, reposted by local activists, then picked up by a news outlet in Columbia. Hashtags emerged: Charleston Court, Justice for Hurtho. No one yet knew who her was. The video showed Maya's face clearly, her cheek red but her expression resolute, and it showed Reese, his hands still raised, his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. By the time the courtroom adjourned, the clip had been viewed 10,000 times, each share amplifying a question that refused to be silenced. Who is she, and why did he think he could do this? Maya didn't know about the video, not yet. As the judge banged his gavel, dismissing the hearing without addressing what had happened, she gathered her file and walked out, her steps measured, her head high. The crowd parted for her, some staring, others looking away, ashamed of their own silence. Reese lingered by the prosecutor's table, his jaw tight, his hands restless. He'd meant to intimidate her, to put her in her place, but instead he'd lit a fuse. Outside, the Charleston sun beat down on the courthouse steps, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. Maya paused, her cheeks still throbbing, and took a deep breath. She thought of Marcus, his face bruised and broken in a hospital bed, his voice stolen before he could speak. She thought of Micah, alone in that holding room, his future hanging on a system that didn't see him. And she thought of the SLAP not as an end but as a beginning. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Check X. You're viral. She frowned, opened the app and saw the video. Her heart skipped, not out of fear but out of clarity. The world was watching now, and she wouldn't let them look away. She saved the video, forwarded it to her legal team, and typed a single reply. Let it spread. Then she walked to her car. The weight of the moment settling into her bones. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was everyone's. Back in the courthouse, Reese stood alone in the empty room, the echo of his own actions haunting the silence. He'd struck a woman in broad daylight in front of witnesses because he thought he could. But as his phone lit up with notifications, each one tagging him in that damning video, he felt the ground shift beneath him. For the first time in his 21-year career, Calvin Reese wasn't in control. Across town in a cramped apartment, the young man who'd recorded the video sat on his couch, his hands still trembling. His name was Jamal, a 19-year-old community college student who'd come to the hearing to support a friend. He hadn't planned to be a hero, hadn't planned to do anything but watch. But when he saw Maya stand unbowed, he knew he couldn't stay silent. His post now had 50,000 views, and his inbox was flooded with messages, some calling him brave, others threatening him to take it down. He didn't care. He'd done what he had to do. In her office, Maya sat at her desk, the video playing on loop. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She opened her notebook and wrote 2 words. Not yet. Then she underlined them, her pen pressing so hard it tore the paper. The SLAP had cracked something open, not just in her, but in the city, in the system, in the people who'd watched and done nothing. And Maya Thompson, a woman who'd learned long ago that justice wasn't given but taken, was ready to pull that crack wide open. The storm was coming, and Charleston would never be the same. The Charleston night was heavy with the threat of rain, the kind of humid darkness that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. Maya Thompson sat alone in her modest office, a converted room above a shuttered bookstore on King Street. The desk lamp cast a dim glow over stacks of files, a half-empty coffee mug, and her phone, still buzzing with notifications about the viral video of her assault in the courtroom. Her cheeks still stung from Calvin Reese's slap, a dull ache that pulsed with every heartbeat, but it wasn't pain that kept her awake past midnight. It was the image of Micah Carter, 17 years old, cuffed, alone, his bruised cheek mirroring the ghosts of her past. Maya's fingers traced the edge of a worn notebook, its pages filled with notes from 2 decades of fighting battles most people never saw. She'd learned early that justice wasn't a gift, it was a debt, one the system rarely paid unless you forced its hand. The video of Reese's attack had spread like wildfire across X, racking up 500,000 views in 24 hours, with hashtags like Charleston Court and Who Is She trending. Strangers called her a hero, others a troublemaker, but Maya didn't care about the noise. She cared about Micah, a kid who'd been erased from the system's ledger before anyone could ask why. She opened the thin file on her desk, the one she'd carried into the courtroom. It contained a single page from a colleague, a former public defender named Lena Harris, who'd whispered to Maya about a case that didn't feel right. Micah Carter, arrested for suspicious behavior, outside a convenience store at 8:14 p.m. 3 nights ago. No witnesses, no evidence, no lawyer. The detention center's log showed he'd been held for 48 hours without a phone call to his mother, Tasha, a diner waitress who thought her son had run away. The report was sparse, sterile, written in the kind of bureaucratic prose that buried truth under timestamps and jargon. But to Maya it screamed wrongness. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting to a framed photo on the wall, her brother, Marcus, smiling at 19, his college acceptance letter in hand. He'd been beaten to death by police a month after that photo was taken, his case closed with a single line, suspect resisted. No footage, no apology, just a family left to carry the weight of a lie. Maya had been 20 then, a law student with dreams of changing the world. Marcus's death didn't break her, it rebuilt her, forging a resolve that burned quiet but fierce. She'd sworn never to let another name vanish like his, and now Micah's file felt like a challenge from the past, daring her to keep that promise. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Lena. Check the intake log. Something's off. Maya opened her laptop, logging into a secure database she'd built over years of civil rights work. The Charleston Police Department's public records were a maze of dead ends, but Lena had slipped her a backdoor access code, a favor from an old case they'd worked together. The detention center's log confirmed Micah's intake at 7:51 p.m., 23 minutes before the reported arrest time of 8:14 p.m. Maya's pulse quickened. No cop was so efficient they booked a kid before catching him. This wasn't a mistake, it was a cover-up. She cross-referenced the arresting officer, Calvin Reese. The name hit like a stone in her gut. The man who'd slapped her wasn't just a bully with a badge, he was the architect of Micah's detention, the one who'd written the report that didn't add up. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up Reese's record. 21 years on the force, 6 commendations, 3 nominations for Officer of the Year. A local paper once called him Charleston's Silent Wall, a hero who kept the city safe. But Maya knew better. Heroes didn't slap women in courtrooms. Heroes didn't arrest kids before the clock said they should. She needed more. The public database was a dead end, scrubbed clean of anything that could raise questions. But Lena's text hinted at a source, someone inside the system who'd seen what Maya couldn't. She scrolled through her contacts, landing on a name she hadn't called in years, Malik Hayes, a 27-year-old court clerk she'd met during a pro bono case. Malik was quiet, cautious, the kind of man who kept his head down to survive. But he'd once slipped Maya a file on a wrongful arrest, risking his job to do what was right. If anyone could help, it was him. She texted him from a burner phone, a precaution she'd learned after years of being watched. Grant's Bookstore, 10 p.m. Need your eyes. The reply came 20 minutes later. Risky. But I'm in. Maya exhaled, her breath unsteady. This was the first step into a fight she couldn't unchoose, a fight that could cost her more than her career. But as she looked at Micah's file at the timestamp that lied, she knew there was no turning back. Grant's Bookstore was a relic tucked in a forgotten alley off Calhoun Street. Its faded sign hung crooked, the windows boarded up, the air inside thick with dust and the scent of old paper. Maya arrived early, slipping through the back door Malik had left unlocked. The room was small, lit by a single bulb swaying from a frayed cord, casting shadows over shelves crammed with moldy books. A ceiling fan rattled above, doing little to cut the heat. Maya wore a dark hoodie, her face half hidden, her heart pounding not from fear but from the weight of what she was about to ask. Malik arrived at 10:02 p.m., his small frame hunched, his eyes darting like a man who'd learned to expect trouble. He wore a plain gray jacket, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his glasses fogged from the humid night. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. They monitor everything. You still texted me, Maya replied, her tone steady but warm, a reminder that she trusted him, even if he didn't trust himself. Malik hesitated, then pulled a thick envelope from his coat and set it on the table. This is all I could get without tripping alarms, he said. Unedited scans of Micah's file, the parts they didn't send to the public record. Witness statements with conflicting times, internal notes on non-compliance, and a clip from a hallway camera showing him being let in through the back door, not the main lobby. No warrant, no lawyer, no guardian notification. It's all illegal, Maya, but they've buried it. She reached for the envelope, her fingers brushing the paper, but before she could open it, a flash of light cut through the boarded-up window. Headlights, sharp and unyielding, swept across the room. Malik froze, his breath catching. They're here, he whispered, his voice cracking. Maya's instincts kicked in. She grabbed the envelope, stuffed it into her hoodie, and pulled Malik toward the back door. Move, she hissed, her voice low but urgent. They stumbled into the alley, the gravel crunching under their feet, just as the headlights swung toward them. A black SUV, no plates, idled at the alley's mouth, its engine rumbling like a predator waiting to pounce. Maya's heart raced, but her mind was clear. She'd been followed before, tailed by men who thought they could scare her into silence. They didn't know her. She yanked Malik behind a dumpster, crouching low, her breath shallow. The SUV's doors opened, and 2 figures stepped out, their silhouettes tall and menacing in the dim streetlight. One carried a flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, sweeping the alley. Check the store, a gruff voice said. She's here somewhere. Malik's hand trembled in hers, but Maya squeezed it, her eyes locked on his. Stay calm, she mouthed. We're getting out. She scanned the alley, spotting a narrow gap between buildings, barely wide enough for one person. It led to a side street, a chance to disappear. She nodded toward it, and Malik, though terrified, nodded back. They moved silent and swift, Maya leading the way. The gravel bit into her knees as she crawled, the envelope pressed against her chest like a lifeline. Behind them, the flashlight beam danced closer, the men's boots crunching louder. "I see something," one shouted, and Maya's heart lurched. She pushed Malik through the gap, her shoulder scraping the brick wall, pain flaring but ignored. They emerged onto the side street, the SUV's headlights now a distant glow, but the sound of footsteps was still too close. "Run," Maya whispered, and they sprinted, weaving through parked cars and shadowed doorways. The side street spilled into a busy intersection where late-night pedestrians and neon signs offered cover. Maya pulled Malik into a crowded diner, its windows fogged with steam, the clatter of plates and laughter drowning out their heavy breaths. She guided him to a booth in the back, her eyes scanning the door for any sign of pursuit. "We're safe," she said, though she didn't fully believe it. She slid the envelope from her hoodie, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Malik's face was pale, his glasses askew, but he managed a nod. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You could have walked away." Maya met his gaze, her voice firm. "I lost a brother to vanishing reports, Malik. I don't walk away." The words hung between them, a vow as much as a confession. Malik looked down, his shoulders relaxing for the first time, as if her resolve had anchored him. She opened the envelope, spreading its contents on the table. Pages of scanned documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten note in Malik's slanted script. "There's more. Roar's not alone. Rapid Intervention Unit. They bypass procedure. Names: Reese, Brooks, Whitaker, Ellison. Files are locked, but I'll keep looking." Maya's eyes lingered on the names, each one a piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. The Rapid Intervention Unit wasn't in any public record, but Malik's note confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't one bad cop. It was a system, a machine built to target kids like Micah and make them disappear. The USB drive contained a 30-second clip from a hallway camera, grainy but clear enough. Micah, hands cuffed, was led through a back entrance by Reese, his face bruised, his eyes downcast. The timestamp read 7:49 p.m., 2 minutes before the official intake log. Maya's jaw tightened. This was evidence, hard and undeniable, but it was also a spark, one that could ignite a fire or burn her down. Back in her office, Maya plugged the USB into her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The clip played on loop, each frame searing into her memory. She cross-referenced the documents, finding more discrepancies. A forged signature on Micah's waiver of legal counsel, witness statements that contradicted the arrest report, and a note from Reese himself, subject non-compliant. Extended detainment advised. The language was cold, clinical, but to Maya it was a confession of intent, a blueprint for erasure. She thought of Marcus, his case file cleansed of truth, his name reduced to a statistic. She thought of Micah, still in a cell, his mother waiting for answers that never came. And she thought of Reese, his hand red from striking her, his eyes betraying the fear of being seen. Maya opened her notebook and wrote, "This isn't human error. This is a model." The words felt like a key, unlocking a truth she'd always known but never named. The system didn't just fail kids like Micah. It was designed to. Her phone buzzed, a new text from an unknown number. "You're digging in the wrong place. Stop now or it's not just you." Maya's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She'd received threats before, anonymous calls. Letters slipped under her door, shadows following her home. This was different, sharper, but it only steeled her resolve. She saved the text, forwarded it to her legal team and typed a reply. "I'm not stopping." Then she turned back to the files, the weight of the night settling into her bones. Across town, Malik sat in his tiny apartment, the blinds drawn, his hands still shaking. He'd crossed a line tonight, one he couldn't uncross. The envelope was gone, but the knowledge it held was a burden he'd carry forever. He checked his phone, half expecting a message from Maya, but found nothing. Outside, a car idled too long, its engine a low growl. Malik didn't look out the window. He didn't need to. He knew they were watching. In the Charleston Police Department's precinct, Calvin Reese sat in a dimly lit office, his uniform unbuttoned, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The video of the courtroom slap played on his phone, the comments tearing into him. Coward. Bully. Racist. He slammed the glass down, the liquor sloshing over the desk. He'd meant to shut her down to show her who ran the city. Instead, he'd made her a symbol and himself a target. His phone rang, the caller ID blank. He answered, his voice tight. "Yeah. You messed up, Reese," a low voice said, calm but edged with warning. "Fix it, or we will." The line went dead. Reese stared at the phone, his knuckles white, the room closing in. He didn't know who was on the other end, but he knew what they wanted. Silence at any cost. Maya didn't sleep that night. She pored over the documents mapping connections Reese to the Rapid Intervention Unit, the unit to a shadow network of officers, the network to a system that thrived on invisibility. Each page was a thread, each thread a life, and Micah Carter was just the beginning. She thought of the SUV in the alley, the men with flashlights, the threat on her phone. They wanted her to stop, to fade back into the silence they'd counted on for years. But Maya Thompson wasn't built for silence. She closed her laptop, the screen's glow fading into darkness. The city outside was quiet, but she could feel it stirring, waking to the truth she was about to unleash. The investigation had begun, and with it, a reckoning. "Not yet," she'd said in the courtroom, and now as the first drops of rain hit her window, she whispered it again. "Not yet." But the time was coming, and when it did, Charleston would have to answer. The Charleston City Hall chamber was a relic of another era, its high ceilings and oak-paneled walls echoing with the weight of decisions made and buried. On a muggy morning in June 2025, the room buzzed with an uneasy energy, the kind that precedes a storm no one can predict. Rows of wooden chairs were packed with reporters, activists, city officials, and ordinary citizens, their whispers mingling with the hum of air conditioning that couldn't quite cut the heat. At the center of it all stood a long mahogany table where Maya Thompson, 42, sat alone, her navy blazer pressed but unassuming, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with a calm that masked the fire within. 2 weeks had passed since the viral video of Officer Calvin Reese slapping her in the Charleston County Courthouse, a moment that had ignited a city and thrust Maya into a spotlight she hadn't sought. The video had surpassed 5 million views on X, with hashtags like Charleston Court and Justice for her fueling protests outside police precincts and trending debates on cable news. Strangers hailed her as a hero, others branded her a provocateur, but Maya hadn't spoken publicly, not yet. She'd spent those weeks in her cramped office, poring over the documents Malik Hayes had risked everything to deliver, unedited files, forged signatures, and a grainy video clip proving Micah Carter, a 17-year-old black teenager, had been detained illegally. Those files had led her to a deeper through the shadow unit within the Charleston Police Department, the Rapid Intervention Unit, targeting black youth like Micah and erasing their names from the system. Today, Maya was here for the City Council's emergency hearing, called in response to public outcry over the courtroom incident. It wasn't just about her assault. It was about Micah, about the 27 names she'd uncovered in Malik's files, about a system that thrived on silence. She carried a single folder, its edges worn from nights of relentless study, and a small USB drive tucked in her pocket, loaded with evidence that could crack the city's facade wide open. Her cheek still bore a faint bruise, a reminder of Reese's hand, but it was her resolve that drew every eye in the room. She wasn't here to plead. She was here to demand. The chamber door swung open, and Elliot Grant, Charleston's 55-year-old police chief, strode in, his gray suit impeccable, his salt and pepper hair combed back with precision. Grant was a man of calculated calm, known as the city's balancer, a leader who kept scandals at bay and the department's image polished. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, swept the room before landing on Maya, a flicker of recognition passing through them. He took his seat across from her, flanked by 2 aides, his posture relaxed but deliberate, like a chess player sizing up an opponent he hadn't expected. The council chair, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Tate, banged her gavel, silencing the murmurs. "This hearing is convened to address recent allegations of misconduct within the Charleston Police Department," she said, her voice clipped. "Congresswoman Thompson, you've requested this platform to present your concerns. You have the floor." Maya stood, her movements slow, deliberate. She didn't reach for a microphone, didn't glance at her notes. She simply looked out at the room, her gaze steady, and began. 2 weeks ago, I was struck in a courtroom by Officer Calvin Reese, a man sworn to uphold the law. But this isn't about me. It's about a 17-year-old boy named Micah Carter, arrested without cause, detained without a lawyer, and bruised without explanation. It's about a system that let it happen, and a system that tried to make him disappear. The room went still, every breath held, every pen poised. Maya opened her folder, pulling out a single-sheet copy of Micah's intake log, with its damning timestamp discrepancy. 7:51 p.m. intake, 8:14 p.m. arrest. She held it up, her voice clear, unyielding. No officer arrests a kid before they find him. This isn't a mistake. It's a lie written to protect the guilty and erase the innocent. A murmur rippled through the crowd, reporters scribbling furiously, their cameras trained on the document. Grant's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around his pen, a subtle crack in his composure. Maya continued, her words measured but piercing. Micah isn't alone. I have evidence of 27 cases, 27 names, 27 lives handled internally, hidden from the public, all black youth, all targeted by a unit within your department. Chief Grant. They call it the Rapid Intervention Unit, and it operates outside the law. The chamber erupted, gasps and whispers colliding like a wave. A reporter shouted, "Can you name the unit's leader?" But Maya didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the USB drive, and plugged it into the projector beside her. The screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy hallway camera clip. Micah, cuffed, was led through a back entrance by Reese, his face bruised, his eyes downcast. The timestamp read 7:49 p.m. Maya let the clip play twice, the silence in the room deafening, then turned to Grant. Care to explain why your officer booked a boy before arresting him? Grant leaned forward, his voice smooth, almost soothing. Congresswoman, I understand your passion, but let's not rush to conclusions. Our department processes thousands of cases annually, and errors occur. I assure you, we're reviewing Officer Reese's actions in Mr. Carter's case with the utmost diligence. Maya's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through his polish. Errors don't forge signatures, Chief. Errors don't hide 27 names. She clicked the projector, revealing a list 27 names, ages 10 to 21, each tied to an internally handled case. The crowd gasped again, louder this time, as names like Troy Evans, Kendra Miles, and Jamira Fields filled the screen. These aren't errors, Maya said. They're evidence of a machine you've built, one that targets black kids and buries their stories under your diligence. The chamber doors burst open, and a group of 6 uniformed officers stormed in, their faces flushed, their voices loud. This is a witch hunt, one shouted, a burly man with a buzz cut, his badge glinting. You're slandering good cops. The crowd recoiled, chairs scraping, cameras swiveling to capture the chaos. The officers pushed toward the front, their shouts drowning out Tate's gavel. She's lying. She's tearing this city apart. Maya didn't move, her eyes locked on the officers, her calm a stark contrast to their rage. She recognized the buzz-cut leader James Brooks, one of the names from Malik's files, a member of the Rapid Intervention Unit. The room teetered on the edge of pandemonium, reporters shouting questions, council members demanding order, but Maya raised her hand, a simple gesture that silenced the crowd, if not the officers. If I'm lying, she said, her voice steady, why are you so afraid of what I'm showing? The question hung in the air, sharp and unanswerable. Brooks faltered, his fists clenched, but before he could respond, Maya clicked the projector again. A new file appeared, an audio clip, its metadata timestamped from a police server. She pressed play and a low, unmistakable voice filled the room. Log it internally. Handle it at the coordination level. Keep everything looking clean. And that kid, make sure he doesn't talk to the press. It was Grant's voice, recorded during an internal meeting, obtained by Malik at great risk. The chamber exploded again, but this time it was the crowd's outrage, not the officers. Resign, someone shouted from the back. Justice for Micah, another voice joined, then another, until the room was a chorus of demands. Grant's face remained composed, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to his aides, then to the council, searching for an anchor. He raised a hand, his voice calm but strained. This is out of context. I've never ordered anyone to suppress evidence. Our department is transparent, and I stand by our record. Maya stepped closer, her voice low but resonant. Your record is 27 names, Chief. 27 kids who didn't get a lawyer, a phone call, or a chance. You call that transparency? She turned to the crowd, holding up the list. These are your children, your neighbors, your city. They were erased, but they're here now, and I'm not letting you bury them again. The officers surged forward, Brooks leading the charge, but security guards finally intervened, forming a barrier. Tate banged her gavel, her voice shrill. Order. We will have order. But the room was beyond control, the air electric with the weight of truth laid bare. Reporters live-streamed the chaos, their feeds capturing Maya's unyielding stance, the officer's fury, and the crowd's rising chant. No more silence. No more silence. In the midst of the uproar, a young woman in the front row stood, her hands trembling but her voice clear. My brother's on that list, she said, pointing to the screen. Troy Evans, 21. They held him for 16 hours, no charges, no reason. He's scared to leave the house now. Her words cut through the noise and the crowd quieted, every eye on her. Another voice joined, an older man in a worn jacket. My niece Kendra Miles. They called her uncontrollable for crying after school. She was 19. One by one, voices rose, naming the names on Maya's list, each a crack in the system's armor. Maya didn't speak, didn't need to. She stood, her folder open, her eyes meeting each speaker's, a silent promise that their stories were no longer invisible. The officers, now restrained by security, fell silent, their shouts replaced by the weight of the crowd's truth. Brooks glared at Maya, his face red, but he didn't move. He knew the room had turned. Grant stood, his voice cutting through the fading chaos. I will not be tried in a circus, he said, his tone icy. This department has served Charleston for decades, and we will not be undone by one woman's accusations. He turned to leave, his aides scrambling to follow, but Maya's voice stopped him cold. Then explain this, she said, clicking the projector one last time. A new document appeared, a performance review of Reese, signed by Grant, praising his discreet processing and minimal legal exposure. The room gasped, the implication clear. Grant hadn't just known about the unit, he'd rewarded it. He froze, his back to the crowd, his hands clenched at his sides. For the first time, the balancer looked unbalanced. Tate adjourned the hearing, her gavel barely audible over the crowd's renewed chants. Reporters swarmed Maya as she gathered her folder, their questions a blur. Who gave you the audio? Will you sue the department? Is this a political stunt? She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the door where Grant had disappeared. She'd struck a blow, but the war was far from won. Outside, Charleston's streets were alive with protesters, their signs demanding justice for Micah, for the 27, for Maya. The hearing had been live-streamed by a local news outlet, and within hours, clips of Maya's presentation, the audio, and the officer's disruption were trending nationwide. CNN picked up the story, a headline flashing, Congresswoman exposes Charleston police cover-up in explosive hearing. MSNBC called her the voice of a reckoning. Fox News predictably labeled her a divisive agitator. But the truth didn't need a network to spread. It was in the voices of the crowd, in the names on the list, in the audio that no one could unhear. Back in her office, Maya sat alone, the folder open, the USB drive beside her. Her phone buzzed with messages from supporters, threats from anonymous numbers, and a single text from Malik. You did it. But they're coming for you now. She didn't reply, not yet. She opened her notebook and wrote, the system isn't broken. It's built this way. Then she underlined it, her pen steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. Across town in the police department's headquarters, Grant sat in his corner office, the city's skyline dark beyond his window. The audio clip played on his laptop, his own voice betraying him. He poured a glass of scotch, his hand steady but his eyes distant. Reese stood by the door, his uniform rumpled, his face a mask of barely contained rage. She's got nothing, Reese said, his voice tight. We can bury this. Grant didn't look at him, his gaze fixed on the glass. You buried us the moment you raised your hand, he said, his tone flat. She's not just a woman, Reese. She's a movement now. He took a sip, the ice clinking softly. And movements don't stop until something breaks. In a small apartment, the young woman from the hearing, Troy Evans' sister, sat with her family, watching the live stream replay. Her brother, 21, stared at the screen, his hands shaking. They said my name, he whispered, his voice breaking. They said my name. His sister hugged him, tears in her eyes, and for the first time in years they felt seen. Charleston was no longer just a city. It was a battleground, and Maya Thompson had drawn the line. The hearing wasn't the end, it was the spark. The system had been exposed, its architects named, and its victims given a voice. But Maya knew the fight was just beginning. She closed her notebook, the words not yet echoing in her mind. The time was coming, and when it did, the system would have to answer not just to her, but to a city that refused to stay silent. The Charleston dusk settled over the city like a bruise, heavy and purple, the air thick with the promise of a storm. Maya Thompson sat in her small office above the shuttered bookstore on King Street, the glow of her laptop casting shadows across her face. Her navy blazer hung on a chair, her sleeves rolled up, a faint bruise still lingering on her cheek from Calvin Reese's slap 3 weeks ago. The room was quiet, save for the hum of a desk fan and the occasional ping of her phone, each notification a reminder of the fire she'd ignited. Her explosive city council hearing had exposed the Charleston Police Department's Rapid Intervention Unit, 27 wrongfully detained black youth, and Chief Elliott Grant's complicity. The city was awake, but so was the system, and it was fighting back with a vengeance. Maya's phone buzzed again, a news alert from a local outlet. Congresswoman Maya Thompson faces lawsuit over alleged abuse of power. She clicked the link, her jaw tightening as she read. The Charleston Police Department, backed by a coalition of business owners and former city officials, had filed a 32-page complaint accusing her of unauthorized access to confidential data, inciting organized resistance, and manipulating public sentiment for political gain. The charges were vague but venomous, designed not to convict but to discredit. The article quoted an anonymous source. Thompson's actions threaten the stability of our city. She's exploiting a teenager's case for her own agenda. The teenager was Micah Carter, 17, whose illegal detention had sparked Maya's investigation. The lawsuit didn't mention his bruises, his 48-hour detention without a lawyer, or the forged signatures she'd uncovered. It didn't mention the 27 names she'd read aloud at the hearing, each one a life erased by the system. Instead, it painted her as a rogue, a troublemaker, a black woman who dared to step out of line. Maya leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting to a framed photo of her brother, Marcus, his smile frozen at 19, before a police beating stole his life. The system had buried him with a single line, suspect resisted. Now it was trying to bury her with a lawsuit. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. You can't protect everyone. Stop or it gets worse. Attached was a grainy photo of her leaving her office the previous night. Her hoodie pulled low, her face unmistakable. Maya's heart skipped. Not from fear but from clarity. They weren't just coming for her reputation. They were watching her, tracking her every move. She saved the photo, forwarded it to her legal team and typed a reply. I'm still here. Then she set the phone down. Her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The lawsuit was only the beginning. By morning, Charleston's media landscape had turned hostile. A local news site published a 1,500-word op-ed titled The Congresswoman's Crusade, Justice or Chaos. It questioned her motives, implying she was using Micah's case to boost her political profile. A radio host called her a divider, not a unifier, while a TV anchor speculated about hidden agendas. The worst blow came from an anonymous police source leaking Micah's school record a note from a teacher labeling him uncooperative for refusing to answer questions in class. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Micah wasn't a victim, he was a problem child, and Maya was his enabler. Maya felt the weight of it all, the lawsuit, the articles, the photo, the lies, but it was the attack on Micah that cut deepest. She thought of his mother, Tasha, a night shift waitress who believed her son had run away because the police told her he wasn't in their system. She thought of the 27 others, like Troy Evans and Kendra Miles, whose stories she'd vowed to protect. The system wasn't just fighting her, it was rewriting the victims to silence them all over again. Her office door creaked open, and her niece, Aisha, 22, stepped in, her face etched with worry. Aisha was a law student, Maya's closest confidant since Marcus's death, and the only family she saw regularly. Aunt Maya, you've seen the news? Aisha asked, holding up her phone, a headline blaring. Thompson's reckless campaign risks public safety. They're saying you're tearing the city apart. Mom's freaking out, says you need to stop before they ruin you. Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. Her sister, Carla, had always urged caution, warning Maya to pick her battles after Marcus died. But Maya didn't pick battles, they picked her. Carla scared Aisha, she said, her voice soft but firm. She's scared because she knows what they did to Marcus. But stopping now means letting them win, and I can't do that. Aisha sat across from her, her eyes searching. What if they come for you? Not just lawsuits, but worse? That photo, Aunt Maya, it's creepy. Maya reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. They've been coming for me since I was 20, Aisha. They don't get to decide when I stop. Aisha nodded, but the fear in her eyes lingered, a reminder that this fight wasn't just Maya's. It was her family's, her city's, her people's. The next blow came that afternoon. Kendra Miles, a 19-year-old on Maya's list of 27, was hit by a car while crossing a street near her school. The driver fled, and the traffic cameras were conveniently down. Kendra survived, but her leg was broken, her arm bruised, her spirit shaken. Maya rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding as she navigated the sterile halls. Kendra lay in a bed, her wild curls spilling over the pillow, her eyes distant. "I knew they'd come for me," she whispered when Maya sat beside her. "I spoke at the hearing and now this." Maya took her hand, her voice steady. "This isn't your fault, Kendra. They want you to think it is, but you're stronger than their threats." Kendra's lips trembled, but she nodded, a spark of defiance flickering in her eyes. "I'm not shutting up," she said, her voice barely audible. "Not now." Maya smiled, brushing a curl from Kendra's face. "Good. Because we're just getting started." Back in her office, Maya's anger simmered, not hot but cold, focused. The lawsuit, the media, the photo, Kendra's accident, it was all a coordinated assault, a system flexing its muscle to crush her momentum. She couldn't fight it in court, not yet. The legal process was too slow, too rigged. She couldn't trust the media, not when half the outlets were parroting the department's lies. But she could speak directly to the people, and she knew how. She set up her laptop, a single webcam perched on a stack of books, the desk lamp casting a warm glow. No crew, no script, just her and a glass of water. She opened a YouTube channel she'd created under a pseudonym, Charleston Truth, and hit go live. The feed flickered to life, her face filling the screen, her bruise faintly visible, her eyes steady. "This isn't about me," she began, her voice low, resonant. "This is about a system that thinks it can silence us with lawsuits, lies, and fear. They want you to doubt me, to doubt Micah Carter, to doubt the 27 names I showed you. But I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to show you what they're hiding." She held up the photo from the anonymous text, her fingers steady. "They sent me this last night. A picture of me leaving my office with a note. You can't protect everyone. They think this scares me. They think it scares you. But here's what scares them." She opened her folder, pulling out Micah's forged intake log, the timestamp discrepancy clear. "They're scared because we see this. Because we see the lies they wrote to bury a 17-year-old boy." The live chat exploded, comments flooding in. "Keep going, Maya. They can't stop you. Justice for Micah." Maya didn't pause, her voice gaining strength. "They hit Kendra Miles with a car to shut her up. They sued me to shut me up. They lied about Micah to shut him up. But we're not shutting up." She held up the list of 27 names, reading each one slowly, deliberately, letting them echo in the digital void. Troy Evans, 21. Kendra Miles, 19. Jamira Fields, 10. These aren't just names. They're people, and they're still here, still speaking. She played the audio from the hearing, Grant's voice ordering a cover-up, and the chat erupted again, viewers sharing the link, reposting clips. "If I'm wrong," Maya said, looking into the camera, "why are they so afraid of this? Why sue me? Why follow me? Why hurt a 19-year-old girl?" She leaned closer, her voice a blade. "I don't need you to believe me. I need you to ask, if they're telling the truth, why do they need to silence us?" Within an hour, the live stream had 200,000 views, the numbers climbing as viewers shared it across X, Reddit, and TikTok. A civil rights attorney in Atlanta reposted it with a caption, "This is what courage looks like." A high school teacher in Charleston shared it with her students, sparking a classroom discussion that spilled onto social media. By midnight, the video had 1 million views, and the hashtag Charleston Truth was trending nationwide. But the system didn't sleep. At 2 a.m., Maya's phone buzzed with another text, this time a photo of Aisha walking to her car after class, captioned, "Family's fair game." Maya's breath caught, her hands shaking as she saved the image. She called Aisha, her voice calm despite the panic clawing at her chest. "Stay at a friend's tonight," she said. "Don't go home." Aisha protested, but Maya cut her off. "I need you safe, Aisha. Please." Her niece agreed, her voice small, and Maya hung up, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She didn't call the police, trust in them had died with Marcus. Instead, she forwarded the photo to her legal team and wrote in her notebook, "They're escalating. They think fear wins." She underlined it, her pen pressing hard, then added, "They're wrong." The threat to Aisha was a line crossed, but it only sharpened her focus. She wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Aisha, for Kendra, for Micah, for every name on that list. The next morning, Charleston woke to a city divided. Protesters gathered outside City Hall, their signs demanding justice, while a smaller group, backed by police union funds, counter-protested, chanting, "Back the Blue." A local TV station aired a segment questioning Maya's mental stability, citing sources close to the department. But the live stream's impact was undeniable. Community groups organized watch parties, replaying Maya's words in church basements and rec centers. A group of high school students launched a petition for Micah's release, gathering 10,000 signatures by noon. Maya met with her legal team in a borrowed office at a community center, the lawsuit looming like a storm cloud. Her lead attorney, Elise Choi, a former watchdog for land seizure cases, skimmed the complaint. "This is a scare tactic," Elise said, tossing the document aside. "They're stalling, hoping you'll back down." Maya nodded, her eyes distant. "They don't know me," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I don't back down." Elise leaned forward, her tone serious. "They'll keep coming, Maya. The photo Kendra's accident, now your niece theory not playing fair." Maya met her gaze, her bruise catching the light. "They never have. But neither will I." She outlined her plan, no press conferences, no countersuits, just more exposure. She'd release the forged documents, the audio, the threat photos, all on Charleston Truth, letting the public see the system's desperation. That night, Maya visited Tasha Carter, Micah's mother, in her small apartment near the diner where she worked. Tasha sat at the kitchen table, her hands wringing a dish towel, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "They're saying my boy's trouble," she said, her voice breaking. "They're saying you're using him. I don't know what to believe anymore." Maya sat across from her, her voice gentle. "Tasha, they're lying because they're scared. They're scared of you, of Micah, of what we're showing the world. Look at this." She pulled out her phone, showing Tasha the petition, the live stream comments, the voices rallying for her son. Tasha's eyes widened, tears spilling over. "I thought he was gone," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost him." "You haven't," Maya said, her hand on Tasha's. "And you won't. We're bringing him home." Tasha nodded, clutching the phone like a lifeline, and for the first time, hope flickered in her eyes. Back in her office, Maya prepared for the next live stream, her resolve hardened by Tasha's tears, Aisha's fear, Kendra's pain. The system thought it could break her with lawsuits and threats, but they'd underestimated her. She wasn't just a congresswoman or a lawyer. She was a sister, an aunt, a witness to a truth they couldn't bury. She opened her laptop, the webcam blinking on, and hit go live again. "They think they can scare us," she said, her voice a quiet storm. "They think they can silence us. But we're not afraid, and we're not silent. Not anymore." The views climbed 300,000, then 500,000. Each click a voice joining the fight. Charleston was no longer just a city, it was a reckoning, and Maya Thompson was its spark. The system had struck back, but she was striking harder, and the world was watching. Charleston's summer heat pressed against the city like a heavy hand, the air thick with humidity and the faint tang of saltwater from the harbor. It was late June 2025, and the city was a powder keg, its streets alive with whispers, protests, and the weight of truths too long buried. Maya Thompson stood at the edge of a small community center on the west side, a modest brick building with peeling paint and a sign that read East Haven Hub. Inside, she transformed a storage room into what she called Room 27, a safe space for the victims of the Charleston Police Department's Rapid Intervention Unit to share their stories. The room was simple wooden chairs, a borrowed projector, a whiteboard scrawled with names, but it was a beacon, a place where silence was no longer the price of survival. Maya, 42, wore a plain white blouse, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes carrying the weight of weeks of battle. The lawsuit against her, filed by the police department and its allies, loomed like a storm cloud, accusing her of abuse of power and inciting unrest. The media had turned vicious, painting her as a divisive agitator, while anonymous threats a photo of her, another of her niece Aisha, had escalated the stakes. Kendra Miles, a 19-year-old victim from her list of 27, was recovering from a hit-and-run that felt too deliberate to be coincidence. Yet Maya's resolve hadn't wavered. Her live stream on Charleston Truth, exposing the system's lies, had reached 3 million views, sparking a movement that no lawsuit could silence. Today, she was here to fan that spark into a flame. Room 27 was packed, its 20 chairs filled with victims, families, and supporters, their faces a mosaic of hope and fear. Troy Evans, 21, sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Kendra Miles, her leg in a cast, leaned on crutches beside her former teacher, Ms. Lena Harris, who'd first tipped Maya off about Micah Carter's case. Tasha Carter, Micah's mother, stood near the back, her dish towel still tucked in her pocket from her diner shift, her expression a mix of exhaustion and defiance. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that precedes a moment no one can unsee. Maya stepped to the front, her voice steady but warm. "This isn't a courtroom," she said, her eyes meeting each person's. "This isn't a press conference. This is a place where we take back what they stole, our voices, our names, our truth." She held up the list of 27 names, now a symbol of resistance, and began. "We're here to tell our stories, not because they're easy, but because they're ours. Who wants to start?" Troy raised his hand, his voice trembling but clear. "I'm Troy Evans," he said, standing, his faded white shirt buttoned to the collar. 3 years ago, I was 18, riding my bike home from work. They stopped me, said I looked suspicious. Held me for 16 hours, no charges, no phone call. They told me if I talked, they'd come for my mom's job." His voice broke, but he pressed on. "I stopped riding my bike after that. Stopped going out at night. But I'm here now and I'm not hiding anymore." The room erupted in applause, not loud but solid, a sound that felt like a heartbeat. Kendra went next, her crutches clattering as she stood. "I'm Kendra Miles, 19, she said, her wild curls framing her face. "They took me from school when I was 16, said I was uncontrollable for crying after a bully pushed me. 7 hours in a cell, no one told my grandma. Last week a car hit me. They said it was an accident, but I know better." Her eyes locked on Maya's, fierce despite the pain. "I'm not scared anymore. They can't take my voice." One by one, voices rose. Jamira Field's grandmother, clutching a photo of her 10-year-old granddaughter detained for interfering during an eviction. Isaiah Thomas, 16, arrested for attitude during a stop. Tasha, who spoke of searching for Micah, only to be told he didn't exist in the system. Each story was a thread, weaving a tapestry of pain and resilience that filled the room with a quiet power. Maya didn't interrupt, didn't guide. She listened, her folder open, her eyes a silent promise. "You are seen." Outside, Charleston buzzed with the movement Maya had sparked. But not everyone was ready to listen. As Room 27's second meeting began, a crowd gathered outside the community center, their voices loud, their signs angry. "Back the blue. Stop the lies." The group, organized by a police union and funded by local business owners, was small but vocal, their chants echoing through the center's thin walls. Maya ignored them, focusing on a new speaker, a 15-year-old named Malik's cousin who'd been detained for loitering near a park. But the chants grew louder, punctuated by the clatter of thrown objects, empty soda cans, then a bottle shattering against the wall. The room tensed, hands gripping chairs, eyes darting to the windows. Tasha clutched her towel, her voice low. "They're not gonna let us talk, are they?" Maya met her gaze, her calm unshaken. "They can shout all they want, Tasha. They don't get to write this story." But the noise escalated, a rhythmic pounding on the door, voices slurring racial slurs and threats. "Go back where you came from. You're tearing this city apart." Maya stood, her heart pounding but her face a mask of resolve. "Keep going," she told the group, nodding to the next speaker. But a brick crashed through the window, glass shattering across the floor, and the room erupted in gasps and screams. Kendra ducked, her crutches slipping while Troy shielded his sister. Maya moved to the window, peering through the jagged hole. The crowd outside, about 20 men, some in police union t-shirts, others in plainclothes, cheered as a man with a megaphone shouted, "Thompson's a liar. Stop her now." Security was nowhere to be seen, the center's lone guard overwhelmed. Maya's phone buzzed, a text from Aisha. "I'm outside. It's bad. Get out." Maya's breath caught, her niece's safety flashing through her mind, but she couldn't leave, not now. She turned to the group, her voice cutting through the panic. "They want us to run. They want us to hide. Are we running?" "No," Troy shouted, his voice raw but firm. Kendra stood, her cast thudding against the floor. "Hell no." The room rallied, their fear hardening into defiance. Maya nodded, her eyes blazing. "Then let's show them who we are." She grabbed the projector, dragging it to the broken window, and plugged in the USB drive. The screen flickered to life, projecting the list of 27 names onto the building's outer wall, visible to the crowd outside. The chants faltered as the names glowed in the twilight. Troy Evans, Kendra Miles, Micah Carter, Jamira Fields. Maya stepped to the door, flinging it open, her silhouette framed against the light. "You want to stop us?" she called, her voice carrying over the megaphone. "Then tell me why these names were erased. Tell me why a 10-year-old was detained for standing on her own porch. Tell me why a boy was beaten for holding a water bottle. You can throw bricks, but you can't throw away the truth." The crowd froze, caught off guard by her presence, her fearlessness. The man with the megaphone, a burly figure in a police union cap, stepped forward, his face red. "You're a traitor, Thompson. You're destroying the city." But his voice cracked, and the crowd behind him wavered, some lowering their signs, others glancing at the names on the wall. A few bystanders, drawn by the noise, began filming, their phones capturing Maya's stand, the broken glass, the defiant faces peering from room 27. Aisha pushed through the crowd, her law school backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wide but determined. "Aunt Maya!" she shouted, reaching the door. Maya pulled her inside, her heart racing but her voice steady. "Stay close," she said, then turned back to the crowd. "You don't scare us," she said, her words a challenge. "You don't own us. This is our city too, and we're not going anywhere." The protesters hesitated, their momentum broken. A police siren wailed in the distance, and the crowd began to disperse, some muttering, others slipping into the shadows. The man with the megaphone glared at Maya, his hand twitching, but he backed away, his bravado crumbling under her gaze. Inside, the group cheered, their voices raw but triumphant. Troy hugged his sister, Kendra raised her crutch like a victory flag, and Tasha wiped tears from her eyes, whispering, "We did it." The live stream of the confrontation, captured by a bystander, went viral within hours, racking up 1 million views on X. The clip showed Maya at the door, the names projected behind her, her voice unwavering against the mob. Hashtags multiplied. Room 27, Charleston rises, no more silence. Each one a spark in a growing fire. National news outlets picked up the story. Their headlines bold. Charleston Congresswoman faces down mob in defense of justice. Local stations aired interviews with Room 27 attendees, their stories amplifying Maya's message. A CNN analyst called it a turning point, while a Fox News host grumbled about mob rule. But the truth was undeniable. Charleston was waking up. The movement spread beyond the city. In Atlanta, students held a solidarity rally, chanting the names from Maya's list. In Chicago, a community group launched a Charleston Truth Watch party, streaming the Room 27 clip. In Charleston schools, teachers paused lessons to discuss the 27, sparking debates that spilled into homes. Parents, inspired by Tasha's story, demanded access to school surveillance footage, citing Maya's evidence of tampered logs. The petition for Micah's release hit 50,000 signatures, forcing the city to schedule an early hearing. Inside Room 27, the group grew, new faces joining each week: mothers, brothers, students, even a retired cop who confessed to signing off on false reports. They called themselves the 27, a name that carried weight, a reminder that they were no longer victims but witnesses rewriting history. They wrote their stories by hand, ink on paper, each page a testament no system could erase. Maya pinned them to the whiteboard, a mosaic of courage, and above it, she wrote, "We are the ones who remember." At Mount Salem Church, the elderly pastor, Reverend James, preached a sermon that went viral, his gravelly voice ringing out. "We taught our children to be good, to be quiet, to be safe. But if silence doesn't protect them, then we teach them to speak, to stand, to live." The congregation rose, clapping, their applause a wave that carried beyond the church walls. Community centers hosted Trace the Eraser forums, where families mapped their own encounters with the system, each story a step toward accountability. Maya watched it unfold, her phone buzzing with clips, petitions, and messages of support. She didn't lead the movement. She didn't need to. The 27 led themselves, their voices a chorus no one could silence. She met with Tasha again, showing her the petition, the forums, the sermons. "Mike is coming home," Maya said, her voice soft but certain. Tasha hugged her, sobbing, her dish towel falling to the floor. "You gave me my boy back," she whispered. In her office, Maya sat alone, the whiteboard now covered in stories, the list of 27 a beacon in the dark. Her phone buzzed a text from Malik Hayes, the clerk who'd risked everything to help her. "They're watching me, but I'm not stopping." She smiled, typing back. "Neither are we." The system had tried to break them, but it had only awakened them. Charleston was no longer a city of hidden voices. It was a city where truth had learned to speak, and Maya Thompson, standing at the heart of it, knew the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she wasn't alone. The Charleston Federal Courthouse loomed over Broad Street like a sentinel, its gray stone facade unyielding under a cold November sky in 2025. Inside, Courtroom 7 was a crucible, its oak benches packed with families, reporters, and activists, their breaths mingling in the tense air. The fluorescent lights buzz faintly, casting stark shadows on the walls where portraits of stern judges seem to watch the unfolding drama. Maya Thompson, 42, sat at the plaintiff's table, her navy blazer pressed, her dark eyes steady despite the weight of the moment. She wasn't alone. Her legal team, led by Elise Choi, flanked her, their plain white shirts a quiet rebellion against the system's pomp. But it was Maya's presence, her unyielding resolve, that held the room captive. 6 months had passed since the slap in the courtroom, since Maya exposed the Charleston Police Department's Rapid Intervention Unit and its 27 victims, Black youth like Micah Carter, Troy Evans, and Kendra Miles, erased from records but never from memory. Her live streams on Charleston Truth had sparked a movement, her Room 27 meetings had given voice to the silenced, and her defiance against a mob had turned Charleston into a battleground for truth. The system had fought back with lawsuits, threats, and a hit-and-run targeting Kendra, but Maya had pressed on, her evidence-forged logs, leaked audio, handwritten testimonies now the backbone of a federal lawsuit against the department. Today in this courtroom, the reckoning had arrived. The lawsuit, spanning 147 pages with 327 exhibits, wasn't just about one officer or one case. It accused the department of systemic misconduct, data manipulation, illegal detentions, and a shadow patrol network funded by private interests. The final section quoted a 14-year-old boy detained for wearing a suspicious hoodie. "I didn't think anyone would believe me because I hadn't learned how to name injustice." Those words hung over the trial, a challenge to a system that had thrived on disbelief. The courtroom doors opened at 8 a.m., and the crowd surged in, clutching photocopies of their children's records, drawings of kids too scared to wear their school uniforms, and signs that read "Believe us." A father carried his 8-year-old son on his shoulders, the boy holding a cardboard placard. "I just want to be believed when I say I'm trying." Maya's niece Aisha, 22, sat in the front row, her law school notebook open, her eyes fierce with pride. Tasha Carter, Micah's mother, stood beside her, her hands trembling but her head high. The 27 were here, not as victims but as witnesses, their presence a silent verdict. Judge Evelyn Harper, a no-nonsense woman with gray curls and sharp eyes, banged her gavel, silencing the murmurs. "This court will hear the case of Thompson versus Charleston Police Department," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Ms. Thompson, your opening statement." Maya stood, her movement slow, deliberate. She didn't reach for notes, didn't glance at the crowd. Her voice was low, resonant, like a preacher delivering a sermon no one could ignore. "If a system fails once, it's a mistake," she began, her eyes sweeping the room. "If it fails 5 times, it's a breakdown. But if it fails consistently for over a decade, targeting the same people, erasing the same names, is that still a mistake? Or is it design?" The courtroom held its breath, every word landing like a stone. "We're not here to punish individuals. We're here to name a system that erased 27 Black children from its records and expected them to stay silent." The defense attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Richard Vaughn, fired back. "There is no evidence of a formal policy targeting minorities," he said, his tone polished. "Each case was processed legally, and we request dismissal on grounds of insufficient institutional violation." His words were confident, but his eyes flickered to the gallery, where the 27 stared back, their silence louder than any argument. Maya didn't flinch. "We don't need a written policy," she said, her voice steady. "We have repetition. We have consistent language. And we have 27 people who were erased but are still here to speak." She nodded to Elise, who projected the list of names onto a screen, each one glowing like a beacon. Troy Evans, 21. Kendra Miles, 19. Micah Carter, 17. Jamira Fields, 10. The crowd stirred, some whispering the names, others wiping tears. The trial unfolded over weeks, each day a battle of evidence and will. Malik Hayes, the 27-year-old court clerk who'd risked everything to help Maya, took the stand first, his pale blue shirt wrinkled, his glasses slipping down his nose. "I wasn't threatened," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "I was told deleting records protected the system. But I realized the system doesn't need protection from the truth, it needs protection from those who distort it." His testimony unveiled a bombshell, a shared report template, Template 3, Nonviolent Incident Handling, used 86 times in 5 years, mostly for Black high school students. The courtroom gasped, reporters scribbling furiously. Tasha Carter testified next, her voice raw as she recounted searching for Micah. "They told me he wasn't in the system," she said, looking at the jury. I believed them because they had computers. I only had a heart. But their computers are better at deleting names than finding people. Her words hung in the air, a mother's pain cutting deeper than any legal brief. The defense faltered, their witnesses stumbling. A mid-level officer, questioned about camera malfunctions in 4 incidents, paused for 16 seconds before muttering, "I was told it was a glitch." Maya leaned forward, her voice sharp. If the system always glitches when it could prove someone innocent, maybe the glitch isn't the system's. The jury's eyes narrowed, their notebooks filling with doubt. On the 12th day, the trial reached its climax. Maya requested permission to deliver a personal closing statement, a rare move. Judge Harper nodded and Maya stood, carrying only a blank whiteboard. She wrote a single question in bold marker: if justice only exists when proven by video, who protects those erased from the frame? She turned to the jury, her voice a quiet storm. "We're not asking you to punish everyone. We're asking you to name what's happened here for years, a system not broken by accident, but allowed to be. It didn't just erase people from paperwork. It erased them from memory. Don't let it happen again." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling like dust after a quake. Judge Harper paused, her gavel still, then announced a 1-week extension to review new evidence. But the real turning point came on the 14th day, during a routine defense witness testimony. The witness, a retired officer named Lamar Hensley, 62, stood at the stand, his hands trembling, his eyes avoiding the gallery. He'd signed off on 4 no misconduct reports tied to Reese, a fact Maya's team had highlighted. Vaughn asked him to confirm the department's integrity, expecting a rote defense. Hensley cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. "I can't," he said, his words shattering the room's calm. The crowd gasped, Vaughn's face paling. "I signed those reports because I was told to," Hensley continued, his voice growing stronger. "I knew they were wrong. I knew kids were being hurt. But I told myself it was for the greater good, to keep the city stable." He looked at Maya, his eyes wet. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The courtroom erupted, reporters shouting, the gallery cheering, Judge Harper's gavel useless against the tide. Vaughn scrambled to object, but the damage was done. Hensley's confession, live-streamed by a local outlet, went viral within minutes, the clip shared across X with captions like "the system cracks and truth wins." It was the spark that broke the department's facade, a moment no one could unsee. The fallout was swift. That night, Chief Elliot Grant resigned. His press released a single paragraph citing personal reasons. No cameras, no apologies, just a man slipping into the shadows he'd once controlled. 2 deputy directors followed, their resignations quiet but damning. A leaked email from a department IT admin confessed to creating a secret admin account for Grant's office, used to alter logs. The Department of Justice, already investigating, released a preliminary report. Evidence of systemic data manipulation and neglect of legal reporting. 20142023. The media coined a new term. The system without a name. A structure where no one claimed responsibility, but no one was naive enough to believe no one benefited. Maya didn't celebrate. Victory wasn't a headline or a resignation, it was a promise kept. She convened a meeting at the East Haven hub, not to gloat but to plan. The room was packed, survivors, families, law students, teachers, even the retired cop who'd confessed. Together, they drafted the Charleston Pledge for Transparent Justice, a document demanding a ban on unchecked surveillance, independent oversight of disciplinary actions, and parental consent for student data sharing. The pledge wasn't signed by Maya, it bore the names of the 27, their ink a testament to their new role as authors of change. The federal court's ruling came a month later, a 62-page decision that validated Maya's claims. The department had violated civil rights through systemic and deliberate misconduct. No officers were jailed, but the ruling mandated reforms, including civilian oversight boards and public access to arrest logs. Micah Carter was released, his charges dropped, and Tasha hugged him outside the courthouse, sobbing as cameras flashed. Troy Evans enrolled in community college, his bike back on the road. Kendra Miles, her leg healing, spoke at a school assembly, her crutches gone, her voice strong. But Maya knew systems don't die, they adapt. She turned her focus to building something new. On Charleston's west side, she reclaimed a defunded library, its windows boarded, its shelves empty. With volunteers, she painted the walls, built shelves from reclaimed wood, and hung a crooked whiteboard missing a screw. She called it the Thompson Community Law Room, a place not for lectures but for learning to know your rights, to question authority, to speak when silence feels safer. The first class had 12 people, a high school freshman, a wrongfully arrested worker, a mother who'd lost her son to a glitch. Maya didn't teach from a curriculum. She asked one question: the last time you were told to be quiet, what did you do? Some didn't answer, but no one left early. The next week, they brought friends, and within months, the room was full 3 nights a week. A boy beaten for holding his phone learned to draft a petition. A father denied his son's file learned to cite statutes. Aisha started a free legal aid hotline, her law school notes now a playbook for change. Charleston changed, not with sirens or riots, but with a quiet wave. Students quoted laws during searches, parents sued for transparency, communities held Trace the Eraser forums to map their own erased stories. The media called it the silent wave, a movement without a single leader because everyone had learned to stand. Maya didn't run for higher office, didn't write a memoir. She taught, she listened, she stayed. One evening, a journalist visited the law room, his recorder in hand. "Do you feel recognized?" he asked. Maya smiled, glancing at a group of teens taping a rights poster to the wall. "If someone needs me to be famous to believe me, they're not listening," she said. He pressed, "Would you choose a quieter path?" She looked out the window, where Charleston's skyline glowed against the dusk. "I don't need recognition," she said. "I need more seats for young people to sit with me." They came, one by one, from every corner of the city, black, white, young, old, each carrying a story, each learning to speak. The law room grew, its walls covered in handwritten pledges, its whiteboard a map of rights reclaimed. A year later, a student asked, "Has the system changed?" Maya paused, then said, "I don't know. But people have changed how they live inside it." And sometimes, change starts with a question asked by a voice that no longer shakes. Why should I be silent if I've done nothing wrong? Outside, Charleston breathed differently. The 27 were no longer names on a list. They were teachers, advocates, the heart of a city that had learned to listen. Maya stood at the law room's door, watching a new class begin, their voices rising, their questions bold. The system hadn't vanished, but its shadows had nowhere left to hide. Victory wasn't an end, it was a beginning, and Maya Thompson, once a lone spark, was now a flame that a city carried forward. All right, folks, let's take a moment to step out of Charleston's courtroom drama and breathe. That was quite a ride, wasn't it? Maya Thompson, a woman who turned a slap in the face into a slap in the system smug mug, showed us what happens when you refuse to stay quiet. But before you close this tab and go back to scrolling cat videos on X, let's talk about what this story means for you, sipping that overpriced latte or sneaking a peek at this during your lunch break. Because Maya's fight isn't just a 2025 Charleston thing, it's a right now, real-world wake-up call, and I've got some thoughts, a few laughs, and a couple of questions to throw your way. First off, let's give it up for Maya. I mean, come on, the woman took a hit literally and turned it into a movement that made a police chief pack his bags faster than you can say, resignation letter. That's not just courage, that's next-level courage, the kind that makes you wonder if she's got a secret superhero cape stashed in her blazer. But here's the kicker. Maya wasn't born with a megaphone or magic wand. She was a sister, an aunt, a regular person who'd lost someone to a system that loves its paperwork more than its people. Sound familiar? Maybe you felt that sting when a rule, a form, or a policy made you feel invisible. Maybe it was a job application ghosted, a complaint ignored, or that time you got profiled for wearing the wrong hoodie. Maya's story reminds us that those moments aren't just bad luck. They're part of a system that's been playing hide-and-seek with justice for way too long. Now let's get real. In 2025, we're all drowning in information X posts, TikTok rants, 24/7 news cycles screaming at us to pick a side. It's tempting to tune out, to say, "That's Charleston's problem, not mine." But here's where I slip in a little education with a side of sass. Injustice doesn't need a passport. Is chilling in your city, your school, your workplace, probably sipping the same overpriced latte you are. Maya showed us that silence is the system's best friend. And every time we shrug and say, "Not my fight," we're RSVPing to that injustice party. So what's the lesson? Speak up. Even if your voice shakes, even if it's just a whisper at first. Whether it's calling out a shady policy at work, signing a petition for someone like Micah, or just asking, "Why does this feel wrong?" Your voice is the kryptonite to a system that bets on your silence. Let's lighten things up for a second, because life's too short to be serious all the time. Picture this. You're at a family reunion, and your loud uncle is ranting about how the system's fine, just follow the rules. You could argue, or you could channel Maya and drop a truth bomb with a smile. Uncle Joe, if the system's so great, why's it got more glitches than my old flip phone? That's the Maya Thompson way. Hit him with facts, keep it cool, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. It's like serving shade with a side of wisdom, and trust me, it's a vibe we all need in 2025. Here's where you come in. Think about your own life. Have you ever been told to stay in your lane when you knew something was off? Maybe it was a teacher brushing off your concerns, a boss ignoring your ideas, or a cop giving you that look for no reason. What did you do? Did you stay quiet, or did you push back, even a little? Drop your story in the comments. I am serious, I want to hear it. And while you're at it, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today to make sure my voice or someone else's isn't erased? It could be sharing this story, calling out a wrong, or just listening to someone who's been ignored. Small moves, big waves, just like Maya showed us. Now let's talk about the bigger picture. Maya's fight isn't stuck in Charleston or 2025, it's a blueprint for right now, wherever you are. In a world where algorithms decide what's trending and systems decide who's worthy, standing up feels like shouting into a void. But Maya proved the void listens when you keep shouting, especially when you've got a community behind you. And here's my hot take, served with a smirk. Systems love to act like they're the grown-up in the room, all serious and we've got this. But when you peel back the curtain, they're just a bunch of folks in suits, panicking because someone like Maya dared to say, your math ain't matting. It's almost funny until you remember the cost. Kids like Micah, Troy, and Kendra paid that cost, and they're still here, teaching us that victory isn't a headline, it's a community that refuses to forget. So let's make a deal. Let's be the ones who remember, who speak, who keep the silent wave rolling, whether it's in Charleston, Chicago, or your own backyard. One last thing before I let you go, don't be that person who binges this story and then dips without leaving a trace. Hit that subscribe button on our channel for more stories that aren't just about heroes, but about humans like you, me, and Maya, who decide to stand up when the world says sit down. We've got more truth bombs, more laughs, and more reasons to keep fighting, and you don't want to miss them. Plus, subscribing is free, unlike that latte you're still sipping. So what's stopping you? Join the crew, share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. Who's got the next story to tell? I'm betting it's you.